Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Verdict is In podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Mr. Denis Viskovich, the founder of Future City Lawyers and the British Inter-University Commercial Awareness Competition.
Thank you very much, Rob, and it's a pleasure being here, and thank you for inviting me.
Why did you decide to go into law?
That's a good question. So on the way up, I was thinking, why did I come to the law? I actually wanted to do medicine, to be honest, and I started. And like lots of children of immigrants, they are given three choices: either become a doctor, become a lawyer, or become an engineer. And so my parents gave me those three options, and I ended up being a lawyer. Because at the end of the day, I quite liked negotiation. At high school, we did these competitions where we liked practice arguing a point. And I thought that was interesting, that you could actually influence a transaction or a client and achieve their goal for them. So I thought that was the reason why I went into commercial law.
So you came over here when you already had a little bit of experience under your belt.
So yes, I qualified in Australia with a law firm called Parker & Parker. I did a couple of years work there, so I think I did 2.5, 3 years post-qualified, and came here when I was in my late 20s.
So what was it like when even as a trainee, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but you've finished your degree and you're starting working. So what were those first few years like when you were in Australia?
So it's a similar system. It's a 2 years to qualify. It's a 2 years training contract. They still do call it article clerks. I mean, you guys, article clerks originated here in the UK, in England, and then you've changed it now to trainee solicitors. We have kept the article clerkships going. And then the work, again, because we were working on big transactions in Perth. I'm from Perth. We were working for some of the biggest Australian clients. I mean, I remember this vividly. Day 3, I got to work on a transaction for one of the most important Australian companies, one of the most famous Australian companies back then. So, I was very lucky. But I knew that when I joined that law firm, because I had 6 offers when I left university, but I chose that one because of that experience.
Yeah, and I remember you mentioning before that you worked incredibly hard for it. And you just said you were from Perth. I thought you were from the Outback. That's what you told us.
I am from the Outback, but I went to university in Perth, and I qualified in Perth. But yes, I'm 1,000 miles north of Perth, from a small little town on the coast. Yes, a tiny little house. So I always say to my students, look, wherever you grow up, I grew up in the middle of the Outback, and I managed to have an international career in one of the most important financial cities in the world. That you guys have got the limit. You guys have got no limit. You can do all that yourself if you want to achieve it. So if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Yeah, and it's a very inspirational story. Yeah. So out of your career, you've already mentioned you worked on some incredible deals. And what sticks out as a kind of like highlight of your career?
There are lots of transactions I can think of. Doing some massive transactions in Russia for some of the largest companies in Russia, but also in Kazakhstan, as I mentioned before, in Ukraine, in South Africa. We did the deal for the biggest South African company in South Africa. So there are many, many of those. And what I think I really enjoyed about all those transactions is that you are having to work in a different jurisdiction with different people, with different cultures and different backgrounds, trying to undertake whatever they're trying to do, raise funds through a bond issue or a loan or an acquisition. But what I thought was really fascinating was that end of the day, you're all working together to that one goal, which is to achieve that objective as a team, as a legal team, both in-house, external, the company, the opposition, the counterparty. And that's what's really good. At the end of the day, despite all those differences in cultures, language, backgrounds, you all are working for the same thing, which is to complete that transaction. So I think there's no one particular transaction that I can say that was a standout. What I liked was that with all these backgrounds, we all still were able to work together as a team and row in the same boat and achieve the same objective. I thought that was fascinating. Of course, there were bumps in the road and there were things that went wrong, of course, absolutely, either through misunderstanding, having different expectations, issues with local law being in conflict with English law or what we're trying to do, because obviously most of these international transactions that I was involved in as a banking lawyer were under English law, and sometimes they weren't compatible with local law. And that's something that also was very interesting, that you, as an international lawyer like I was, an international banking lawyer, it's not just about the English law, it's about trying to understand from local counsel, and we always had local counsel in these jurisdictions. They would explain to us what the local law is in relation to it. And of course, then that was trying to then amalgamate that or overcome that issue in local law. How is that going to be resolved in our transaction? That wasn't always the case. Sometimes it was very smooth sailing, but there were lots and lots of very scary moments. Again, I remember one in Russia where the Russian lawyers were telling us that our transaction was not only illegal but void under Russian law, which of course put a whole spanner in the whole works. And through many difficult conversations, we got to the end that wasn't correct. That was the rule. So my point, I think that the overarching answer is, if you want an international career where you both put in practice your English law expertise and also then finding out about these amazing jurisdictions of different laws which may not be compatible all the time, that's a really interesting thing to do, because then you're adding value and you're trying to solve that problem for that client to get to that solution with all the obstacles or problems that the local law sets up. As I said, in most transactions that won't be the case, but when they come up, it's a very interesting transaction, because that's a really good thing.
Yeah, it definitely sounds it. But I was wondering, it sounded like you enjoyed working the process of being part of a team and kind of, that togetherness to approaching these issues. So your experiences in the city, and I guess working for this investment bank, was that everyone was harmonious? Everyone works as a team?
Not always. And of course, again, I say to students, most students will train and qualify at a law firm, which is a different issue than working in-house. And lots of law students don't know much about in-house, and I spent most of my career in-house. Obviously, I worked at the Australian law firm, and then I came to London and worked in-house at an investment bank, at a Japanese investment bank, well, German investment bank first, Deutsche, Japanese one, and then I ended up most of my career at ABN AMRO, which is a big Dutch company, a Dutch bank, which is now part of RBS. Yes, in a team, and I think the law firms, and when you work in a law firm, you're much more in a team environment, but also in-house, you're working part of a legal department. There's lots of support there. You have other lawyers who are much more senior than you, or you have general counsel or deputy general counsel who have lots more experience. And of course, you always have the resources of asking your outside counsel for advice. But if you want to pursue an international career, which I would encourage everybody to do if they so wish to do, there are times when you are in Kazakhstan or in South Africa, and it's 11 o'clock at night, and you're there with the bankers and the client, and you're it. You are the only lawyer in the room sometimes, and lots of questions are being fired at you, and you have to find the answer. And that's not a question of guessing the answer. That's a question saying, look, I don't have the answer, but I will get the answer for you. But sometimes the bankers have commercial pressures to try to force that on you to move the transaction forward. But you've got to stand your ground and just say, look, I don't have the answer, but I will get the answer. That may take overnight, it may take another day, and that comes with seniority. When you become more senior, you're able to do that. So it's a process. It's an absolute process and learning experience.
Yeah, thank you. So let's move on from you and your career to, I guess, your current career, what you're trying to achieve now. Before we get specifically into BUCAC and FCL, what is commercial awareness?
So what started all this is that about 5 years ago, I just came to a conclusion that I wanted to leave the city and the corporate world because, it is, and let's not kid ourselves, it is very stressful, it's lots of hard work, lots of deadlines to meet. That's fine. That is part of the deal. But there comes a point in your time in your life when you think, well, actually, I'd like to do something different. So I left the city and I thought, what could I do? And I was going to go and do some charity work in Africa for a while and then go home to Australia for a bit. And as it happened, one of my friends is a lecturer at a university, a national university, and he said that lots of students are struggling with commercial awareness, that they don't seem to understand what it is. Would I like to come up and give a lecture to the students about that? I went to this university thinking that there'd be about 20 people in the room. As it transpired, there was about 160 people in this lecture hall, and the same question came up: what is commercial awareness? And I always, as Rob says, I always ask this question, what is commercial awareness? Because lots of students, especially first years and even second and third years, just don't seem to understand what it is because it's very vague. So I always break it into three parts, and I've coined this term legal commercial awareness, because commercial awareness, no one is going to train you to be a CFO or a CEO. If you wanted to do that, you should go to business school. We are lawyers, and hopefully you want to be commercial lawyers. So that's why I've put this phrase legal commercial awareness. So the commercial bit, I think most students get that. That is about trying to understand what a company does, what your client does, what are they trying to achieve commercially, and what are they trying, and in what environment are they operating in the economic environment or a particular sector of the economy. So understanding, let's say, a tech company or a bank, what do they do? What are they trying to achieve? What are the pressures in the banking sector or the tech sector right now? This year, obviously, Silicon Valley Bank went insolvent and was bought, Credit Suisse as well. And there's other rumors about other banks at the moment. So, that's the commercial understanding and understanding all these, what's the objective of this client, what are they trying to do. The awareness is understanding how these factors are affecting them. So how are high interest rates affecting companies right now? How is the geopolitical situation affecting companies if they operate on an international basis? How is, if you're a bank, how are these issues that have happened with SVB and Credit Suisse, how has that impacted the banking sector? That's the awareness. How are potential changes in the law going to affect these clients or these sectors? So the commercial bit is a bit more sort of understanding the sectors, understanding the economy, reading the FT, reading The Economist, reading Business BBC, all these other websites out there and Instagram accounts available for you to read all that. That most students get that. The second part is harder. The awareness. How do these factors then affect your particular client in that particular sector? And that's difficult. That is difficult. Now you're applying a bit of economics, so that's more difficult. But that you still need to understand that. So you need to understand what's happening in that sector right now. And the thing that everybody forgets, and not one single person that I know out there talks about this, apart from me, as I'm aware of, is the legal part. There is no point jumping around and talking about interest rates or inflation or all these other things without bringing it back to the legal element. Yes, commercial awareness is about financial and economic stories and other things, but we are not being trained to be CEOs or CFOs or chairmen of banks. That's not what we are training to be as commercial lawyers. We are being trained to be commercial lawyers. So what do commercial lawyers do? Back to that initial conversation I had about being problem solvers, about giving advice to clients to try to solve their issues that they face, these hurdles that they face in achieving their objective. How can we as commercial lawyers help them? And how can we either mitigate or avoid those risks? Because this word risk is missed out in lots of commercial awareness. It is about risk. It is all about risk. We are, in some respects, lawyers, commercial lawyers are risk managers in some respects, like lots of other people. So how do we minimize or avoid these legal risks that we've identified? How do we tell the client, how can we minimize that legal risk or pass that legal risk on to the counterparty? So the last bit is about the legal element. How do we then apply our commercial awareness? How do we apply our commercial awareness in giving really good commercial legal advice to our clients to help the client achieve their commercial objective? That's the whole crux of it. Because in these assessment centers, there are lots of different variables and lots of different examples of assessment centers, ranging from group exercises, group negotiation, individual exercises, individual reading an FT article and explaining what's going on to the partners or the senior associates interviewing. There's a whole plethora of examples. But ultimately, it's all about you understanding what's going on in that sector or that whatever the case is, applying your commercial awareness, so the commercial bit and the awareness bit, but then ultimately trying to provide some legal advice in the context of that. That's what we do that's what I did for 20 years as a banking lawyer. I had to understand what's going on in the Russian gas market, in the Kazakh oil market, in the most of my deals were oil and gas, not oil, in the South African oil market, and knowing what was going on in that particular market and understanding then how any of these legal issues can affect that market or affect that client. So trying to then implement your legal knowledge in the context of commercial awareness. That's what commercial awareness is about. It's not what other people say it is, which is, of course, it is about inflation and interest rates and understanding what's happening in the economy. Of course, that's the case. But I think to do well, I think is also applying that legal knowledge to that commercial situation.
If someone gave you an answer like that in response to your question,
I would be very impressed if they gave me an answer like that, because lots of answers I get it is simply, oh, commercial awareness is reading the FT, because I've been told that. But that's not what commercial awareness is about, or especially not legal commercial awareness, because ultimately anybody should be able to read an article and summarize that article. It's not about summarizing. You're not being tested on your ability to summarize an article. That's not the key test here. The key test is, how do you then apply that commercial awareness to that particular scenario that they've given you in this assessment center, either in this negotiation, or I can tell you right now that sometimes these law firms ask you to read an FT article, but they don't ask you to summarize the article. They then test you about, well, what can we do to assist that client achieve their commercial objective? What can we do? Or ask you lots of questions about it. So yes, it's much more complex than people think it is.
Yeah, so you're talking about the knowledge, and then you have to be more able to contextualize that knowledge. How do you go about getting the ability to contextualize it?
So that's the problem. That is the problem. And so that's why lots of my students were coming up to me and saying, well, actually, we've been on all these other platforms, and we've seen all these people talk about commercial awareness and summarizing, the FTSE's going up, or, this company's buying company B and it's in trouble, or this company's in trouble because it's got too much debt. And yes, of course, that's all important. That's absolutely important. But that isn't what you just said. You need to then be able to apply that and provide solutions or solve the problems in those assessment centers. And don't forget, in these assessment centers, there just won't be law students. There'll also be students from other faculties, because as we all know, you can become a trainee from a different degree, from an economics degree or history degree or politics degree, and then you just do the GDL, and then you go on to do the SQE or LPC or SQE. So in those assessment centers, there will be people with no legal knowledge, but they are being asked to, again, apply that commercial. So the legal element isn't really tested. Well, that's not true. It is there, but these other students don't have that knowledge. You have some legal knowledge, but they are testing the ability to apply this, as you said. So the question is, how do you get that? And so this is what prompted me, and maybe I'm prompting one of your questions, is why did I set up both FCL and BUCAC? And we'll talk about FCL a little bit, and then we'll come back to BUCAC. So Future City Lawyers. Most of my students were and at that point I was teaching as a visiting lecturer at different law schools, and they were just flummoxed by what commercial awareness is. And yes, when I explained that to them, they then went and increased their knowledge, read a bit more, read the FT, all those other things, went to those other Instagram accounts, etc., and other platforms. But they still came back to that question: how do we implement this? How do we practice this skill of putting this in? And there is only one way. You can read a book about how to ride a bike, but until you get on that bike and you ride that bike and you fall off that bike and you get back up on that bike and you ride that bike and you fall off that bike, it's just practice, practice, practice. And I always say this to students: practice, practice, practice. So nobody, as far as I know, out there is doing this, which is what I do at Future City Lawyers, which is we go through scenario after scenario after this. Of course, there's the lectures, and then following that lecture, then there's these case study scenarios where we try to put into practice what we've learned in that lecture. It could be M&A, could be banking finance, could be whatever it may be. And then we do a case study where we put the students in breakout rooms, and they are told, please advise the client on how the client can solve these issues, or how the client can, what can the client do to resolve this issue to achieve their commercial objective. And then they come back and get feedback from me. So it is about just practice in these things. So lots of students are either doing my courses, Or they do this through a commercial awareness society. They set up these in lots of law schools, and they then try to practice that. But it is difficult because doing it without getting that feedback is the critical thing. Undertaking a case study in a group of students is great, very good. But then who is going to tell you whether you guys are on the right track or not, whether you need to improve this or you missed this point? And, with all due respect, that is not going to be a one-year qualified lawyer or a trainee. There's not going to be that because they don't have the experience. It's going to be someone who's got 10, 20 years of experience of doing this sort of thing, which will be able to tell you, actually, look, that point doesn't make sense, or this point is great, but you've missed this point. And you need that feedback because that's the way you're going to learn. That's the way you're going to improve. Back to that bike analogy. If you fall off the bike, you'll get back on the bike and you'll ride the bike in a different way because you just realize that the way you were riding that bike didn't work because you fell off. So my teaching is very practical. It's very much lecture on the topic, and then we do some practical examples, assessment type exercises. And like anything, guys, if you don't practice it, you won't do very well on it. There's no way that I don't think you'll do very well if you go to your first assessment never having done some practice assessment center type examples. It just doesn't make sense. So I would encourage you all to do as many of these practices as possible. But the problem is that no one's doing this out there. That's the problem. That is the problem.
That is the problem. Luckily, students here at NTU, by the time this comes out, unfortunately, all already have actually been done, because next week I'm running assessment centre mock type thing.
And so that is also the key. I'd encourage you to do that, and that's a brilliant thing you're doing. But you need to have that critical feedback. And as Rob knows, my feedback is very Australian. I'm very honest and very direct. There's no. But that's good. And I always say to students, isn't it better that you make the mistake with me than make the mistake at an assessment centre or in front of a partner? It's too late then, because the competition is so fierce that any mistake is going to be marked down quite heavily. And so getting that confidence, getting that practice, who cares if you make a mistake with me? No big deal. No big deal. But I will give you some feedback. I won't say well done, as Rob knows this very well. I won't say well done when actually I don't think it's well done. Too many students have this issue of everything has to be well done. No. Sometimes you make mistakes, or sometimes you just don't know, and that's perfectly fine. That's the whole point of education, is to help you to your critical thinking, help you to logically think of the answer in a time-constrained, pressurized environment. That's also very difficult. And you need that feedback. You need that critical feedback, because I could simply say, well done, but well done, if it's not well done, is not going to get you where you need to be. You need to be told, well, actually, that was really good. That was a really good point. But I think maybe you could say this, or you missed this out, or what did you think of this? And of course, you then build upon that, and you build upon that, and you build upon that, and you become much more confident, much more able to present, because it is about presentation as well. It's another skill that lots of law students don't grab in law school. It is about probably I'm not doing it very well in this interview, but doing it concisely, logically, under pressure, with a time constraint. That's hard. That is really hard. But you've got to be able to do that, because your competition in that room will be able to do it, because they may have been to other law schools or from other backgrounds where they've been doing it since I know that some of my students, or some of my students I've come across, have gone to certain public schools, and at 12 they're doing presentations. Now, I definitely in my high school, in my primary school, we were definitely not doing presentations at 12. That was definitely not the case on my primary school in the middle of the outback. But these students do, and so there's no point being blind to that. There's no point saying, well, actually, that doesn't. I'm going to ignore that. You can't ignore that. That's your competition, and so you need to rise to that level, and all of you can do that. It's just a question of practice. I can tell you guys now that the competition is extremely fierce. And some of these students are 100% committed, 100% focused, and 100% prepared, either because of their background, because their parents are in that industry, lawyers or CEOs, etc. They've been to other schools or other universities. That's okay. That's okay. You can do it. I really encourage my students, but you've got to be aware of what's going on, and the competition is tough, and you only have one chance. You make a fundamental mistake or a couple of mistakes in an assessment center, you are being assessed. There's a clue in that name. It's an assessment. and you are being assessed. And there is no critical feedback. There is simply, as Rob knows, thank you very much for coming. It was very nice to see you. It was very nice to see you. Goodbye. No training contract. So I encourage you all to do that. And I do, but I do encourage you all to practice as much as possible.
Yeah, going back just a bit further and towards the beginning of what you said, but a lot of schools, definitely a lot of private schools, do that kind of advocacy opportunities and training and teaching from a very, very young age. I was involved in the English Speaking Union, which is like debating competition, if you haven't heard. And it's the private school that we were going up against had a debating team and after school opportunities since they were like 14 years old. Right. I got told like a week and a half before the competition I was coming up, you should probably prepare.
Well, I'll give you an antidote. So in high school, one of my A levels was economics, and there was a national economics competition in Australia. Again, I'd encourage you all to do as many competitions as you can. Do mooting, definitely do mooting. Even if you're not interested in litigation, do mooting for the simple fact that it puts you under that time pressure to argue your case in front of a judge in a moot court. It's a good presentation skill improvement, language, thinking on your feet. All that's very transferable to an assessment centre or a commercial lawyer. So I'd encourage you to do that. So this national competition in economics competition in Australia, we were up against. Our teacher was very. Again, I had some great teachers in high school. She was very supportive. Our economics teacher was very supportive of us doing it. It was a team of 3, and so me and my 2 other friends did it, thinking we'll never get anywhere, like you just said, because we're up against some of the best private schools in Australia. I'm not going to name them, but some of the, akin to Eton, Harrow, etc., etc. And 2 hours, and we spent weeks working on this, and we thought, we did a pretty good job, but we thought we're never going to get anywhere. It's just experience. To our surprise, our teacher then comes running into our class one day and she says to us, the 3 of us, she says, we need to buy your tickets. Because again, I was 2 hours flight from Perth. She said, we need to fly down to Perth because you are in the grand final. And we were like, what? And so, our school, we didn't even have a school uniform. We arrived and the other teams all had their blazers and they, spoke much more eloquently with us. And we felt a little bit insecure because we didn't even have any, as I said, no school uniforms. And we looked like the country bumpkins arrived, and we thought, well, okay, maybe we'll come, 7th or 6th or something like that. Maybe we're just a sort of consolidate. We won the competition. And I never forget this as long as I live. Before the announcement, this student at this private school came up to us and said, oh, Australians aren't very posh, but in an Australian posh accent as you can get, said to us, oh, you're from XY, you're from Carnarvon. And we went, yes. And they went, oh, are you here because? And we went, because we were one of the finalists. And we went, oh. And then he said, oh, do you have any school uniforms? We went, no. and I know what he was trying to do. He was trying to belittle us. Don't worry about that, And so he went, oh, the prize was a meeting with the Prime Minister and the Treasurer or the Chancellor in Australia, in Canberra, for the budget. And he was going, have you been to Canberra? No, we haven't been to Canberra. And he was just like really annoying. And then, of course, when we won, we were shocked. Of course, we were shocked, and the whole auditorium was shocked. I went up to him and said, well, actually, we will get some school uniforms. And by the way, we are going to go to Canberra for the first time. So my point in saying, and of course, we met the Prime Minister, and it was a fantastic experience. My point in telling that story is, guys, don't let them put you off. You are just as good at them, but don't kid yourself. You do need to have all these other extra. And as Rob says, some of them have been practicing since 12. And therefore, they do appear much more confident because they are much more able to speak clearly, much more able to present, much more able to have that confidence about them. But that doesn't mean that you can't be like that. You just need to get that through practice, and getting that feedback. That feedback is critical because they've been doing it since 12 or 13 or 14, as you said. You may not have had that experience, and then you really have to do that in your 3-year degree. And so it's definitely trying to embrace and trying to get as much practice as you can to get those skill set, which is very important.
I wish I had a story that could match that for mine, but unfortunately, I just got up and embarrassed myself because it was my first public speaking experience, so it was not very good.
And so back to that. So I was head boy at both my primary school and high school, and the teacher said, "Well, there's going to be a prize ceremony. You have to make a speech." And I went, "What? A speech?" But it's all about learning, and you definitely need to go for it.
Yeah, definitely, I agree with that. Because now, I mean, that kind of terrified me from doing public speaking, but it was also, I realized afterwards, even though it went badly, nothing bad happens. It's just a learning experience.
And guys, so I always say this to my students: what tools does a surgeon have? A scalpel. What tool does a builder have? A shovel or a hammer? What tools do we as lawyers have? We only have words. We either have oral or written words. That's really what we have. That's our tool. So when you think about it, if you're going to be a commercial lawyer or any type of lawyer, you do need to be able to convey your advice, legal advice, to your client in a succinct, well thought of, confident manner. Because the last thing you would do if you're a client paying for a lawyer's advice and that lawyer starts umming and erring and not being confident and dithering, come on, you're not going to be very happy about that. So yes, you've got to be confident, not overly confident, not overly aggressive, of course not, but you do need to have that confidence, and that only comes through practice and presentation skills, negotiation, mooting competitions, negotiation competitions, and BUCAC, and all those things that you just need to practice at it. And yes, you'll fail sometimes. You'll get knocked back like Rob did. But that's okay. That's okay. Look what happened to my little group from Carnarvon in Western Australia. We won that competition, so you can do it, absolutely.
Yeah, I wasn't as well prepared as you were. I only had a week, so let's remember that. But yeah, it is possible. Just never let the circumstance get to you.
Never let anybody get to you. You are as good as anybody else. They may have more skill sets than you. That's true. That is true. But that doesn't mean that you can't get that skill set. It's a question of you getting that skill set, because once you recognize that, I've seen lots of students from different universities who are very confident. Doesn't mean that they are better than any other of my students. It just means that they have a different skill set, which we all of us need to get. And no matter what you want to do as a lawyer, whether you want to be a commercial lawyer, banking lawyer, a litigator, family lawyer, criminal law, you do need that confidence and that ability to speak, provide succinct, logical, well thought out advice in a timely manner. So yes, you need to get that skill set.
Yeah. So moving on from that, because I think we covered that topic fairly well. Do you want to give like a little shout out to BUCAC, because we haven't really spoken about BUCAC so far? So
BUCAC, BUCAC is one of my, having done deals in Russia, Kazakhstan, BUCAC is one of my proudest things. I put on my CV, because it's trying to help non-Russell, and I am shocked, and I can say this as a foreigner, even though I am been here a long time. I am shocked what's happening in the system. So nobody talks about it, and I'm one of these. And it is now getting more airplay, and a lot more people and a lot more law firms are focusing on this, which is a good thing. The stats roughly are, and this is a couple of years ago, but and hopefully it's getting better. But this is the stats that I think the Law Society published, that around 80 to 85% of graduate recruitment in city law firms comes from the Russell Group. So 80 to 85% of trainees are from the Russell Group. And then about 5% are foreigners like me, Australians, Kiwis, Canadians, etc., European. And then lastly, about 10% are from the non-Russell Group. The problem with that stat is that if you look at the number of law schools, percentage-wise, it's the other way around. Roughly around 80 to 85%, 80% of law schools are non-Russell. So let's just break that down. 80% of law schools get 10% of the positions, and yet 20% or 15% of the 15% of the law schools, or 20%, depending on how you look at, they get 80%. That can't be right in Britain 2023. It just cannot be right. That stat cannot be right. So there's something going on that's not right. And I just thought, well, hang on, what can I do to help the non-Russell group of students get more exposure to the city? So lots of things I used to hear was, when I was teaching, was, well, actually I'd like to apply, but I don't think I'm going to make it. Well, yes, the stats are against me, And so lots of students were saying, well, actually, I'm not going to bother. And I thought, well, hang on, that can't be right. We need to encourage these students to apply because, yes, the stats are not great, but the only way we're going to change that is for more non-Russells to apply. But then I thought, hang on, back to my original point I was discussing a minute ago about skill set. Lots of these law schools in these Russell groups provide these other skill sets, which some deans have said to me they are soft skills, and I disagree with that. I think they are essential skills because there's no point having a first-class degree if you don't have any of these soft skills, use their terms, which I disagree with that term. So get a first-class degree from a university without these soft skills will mean that your chances of getting a training contract are far less than the person who has these skills. And these skills include, which you talked about a minute ago, presentation skills, negotiation skills, commercial awareness, all these skills which some deans, I'm going to be out there, say are soft skills. I disagree with that vehemently. They are essential skills, which all of us, no matter what law you're going to do, require. And I wish that more law schools would put more emphasis on that for students because it increases their chances of getting a training contract by doing well in these assessment centres. And back to that lecture I went to that law school where there was 160 odd people in the lecture hall. They were all clamouring for it. They were saying that they have been put off. That was a non-Russell. They were being put off by applying because the chances are so slim that they are failing in all these assessments, in applications, they're not getting through, and even the ones that get through just fail dismally in the assessment centre. So of course that was negative and not very encouraging for them to apply. And so I thought, what can I do? I can't, at that point I was lecturing, I think at 4 different universities, and I just thought, well, I can't lecture at 80 universities, that's impossible, on commercial awareness. So I thought, what could I do? And a group of students from Essex and City and myself came up with the idea of coming up with a commercial awareness competition. But not just a commercial awareness competition, also a competition which would firstly showcase the talent because some of the students I saw and taught were amazing and they definitely required a chance. So this is not saying that these people should be treated differently or specially. That's not what it's about. It's saying, have a look at these students because these students have some really amazing skill sets and they're really great students and they should be given a chance, just a chance. And the motto of BUCAC is level the playing field. So the idea behind the BUCAC, the British Inter-University Commercial Awareness Competition, is to showcase the talent that exists at these non-Russells and to encourage these students to apply to city law firms and for these city law firms to have a look at these students. And in addition to the competition, we run a BCAS, which is a week thing where we have lectures on commercial awareness topics, and we have partners from the 4 main sponsors. And then we also run trainee panels, which is alongside of the competition, again to give exposure to the city law firms to these non-Russell students. So what I did was I thought, well, okay, we need to get some sponsors, we need to get some prizes because obviously that's the whole point of a competition. And as a former head, I just rang out some of the law firms I still would give, hundreds of thousands of pounds and millions of pounds in fees. And I said, look, this is a situation. Would you mind sponsoring the competition? And to my surprise, most of them, not all of them, I'm not going to name them, they said, of course, absolutely, that's a great idea, and of course. And we started off with 12 sponsors. That was 4 years ago in 2020, and now we're up to 28 sponsors. That's a big chunk of law firms that are sponsoring this competition. And why are they sponsoring this competition? They want more non-Russells to apply. They definitely are welcoming you with open arms. They want you to apply, but they want you to apply having this skill set that you need to succeed in the application process and the assessment centre. And one of the key skill set is commercial awareness. So the idea behind the competition is A, alert students to the importance of commercial awareness. B, alert students to the fact that these city law firms want them and would want and encourage them to apply. And there's amazing opportunities at these city law firms. No matter what your background, no matter where you're from, no matter what law school you go to, these law firms want you. If you have the right skill set, of course, and the right, focus, etc. And to give some prizes, amazing prizes. I mean, some of the prizes we've got vacation schemes. You can win a vacation scheme. You know how hard it is to get a vacation scheme at these top law firms. Win assessment centre, golden tickets to assessment centre, win work experience, win graduate, Win meetings with graduate recruitment teams. They will meet with you 2-3 times to go through your CV, go through your application. They will personally assist you. Have trainee mentors. Lunch with partners, some of the prizes are. Meetings with partners of your choice if you're interested in banking law or arbitration or litigation. Open days. There's a whole plethora of prizes out there. And we also have some corporates. We have Shell, we have Aviva, we have another bank that's going to be announced very shortly. So all these law firms and amazing prizes, and lots of the winners that have won have then gone on to get training contracts. I mean, last night we had the Travis Smith trainee panel. The winner of last year's Travis Smith Prize, she got a training contract out of it. You know, so the winner of BUCAC 2021, he got a training contract at Travis Smith, and so the point of this competition is not just about the prizes, but also trying to get more non-Russell students into training contracts with the city. But it's very popular. There are lots of students who do it, and so the thing I always get asked is, well, you know, my chances aren't great to getting the top 24 because we can go through the rounds in a minute. But I say that's not the point. The point is by just taking part in the competition, you increase your commercial awareness. You then are encouraged to read more about it. And you are then also encouraged to learn more about these law firms who are willing to sponsor this competition to encourage you to apply to them. So it's a win-win. Even if you don't get to the top 24 in round 5, you still are able to understand by coming to these events, coming to BCAS, coming to the training panels, to understand a bit more about what these law firms are about, but also more importantly about what they can offer you and what they're looking for. It's very important.
Yeah, and although I forgot to take part in one of the rounds last year, and so I didn't make it, Denis very kindly invited me to the grand final, and I was able to witness it. It really is an amazing opportunity and something that I would encourage everyone to go for.
I would encourage everyone to go to it. So I just maybe a common question I get asked is, what are the rounds? So there are the 5 rounds. There's nothing to be scared of. You know, lots of first years are very scared of this. There's nothing to be scared of, guys, and I'll explain why. So rounds 1, 2, and 3 are multiple choice. 30 multiple choice questions in 14 minutes, 12 minutes, and 10 minutes, decreasing time. Just have a go. And there's some practice quizzes on the website. There's a preparation page. So if you go onto the website, which is www.bucac.biu, I don't know why I come up with such a crazy acronym, but unfortunately that's the way it's going to have to stick, unfortunately. So it's just think of it, honestly, by the time you type BIU, you'll get it. So it's BUCAC. So it's British Inter-University Commercial and Awareness Competition. So www.biucac.com. And there's lots of resources there. Go on the preparation page. Lots of free resources there, lots of things you should be reading. So even if you think, well, actually, I'll just do round 1 and probably won't pass, which I would encourage you not to have that attitude. I'd encourage you to go in there confident, but just getting that resources, all those resources there, all those websites, all those Instagram accounts, all that stuff there. Most of it's free. Obviously, some of it isn't free. Is really good. There's a book called Christopher by an ex-partner of Hogan Lovells, who's one of the sponsors, Christopher Stokes. So Christopher Stokes.
I read that over the summer.
Yeah. Christopher Stokes, he does 2 books. He did 2 books. He published 2 books. One is called Commercial Awareness. That's very introductory. Second one's called All You Need to Know About the City. So All You Need to Know About the City. They're about 12 quid new, and you can buy them secondhand on Amazon for 8 quid. I saw the other day. So they're reasonably priced. Not very big, but reasonably priced. But good summarize and good starting place. So again, all that's on our website. And so all that that would be good that you start doing all that and just have a go and see what you get. If you get through to round 1 or 2 or 3, everybody has 14 minutes, 12 minutes or 10 minutes of their time at 7 p.m. on a Monday on the 30th of October. So I'd encourage you all to do that. Of course. So we whittle it down. We have quite a large number of students who do this, and then we whittle it down to round 4. So last year we had around 2,000. Hopefully this year we'll have more than that. And obviously through the likes of Rob and all these law societies and law schools that are helping us to promote the competition, we get down to round 4, and round 4 is roughly the top 75 or 80, depending on the numbers, something like that. They go through round 4, and round 4 is in 2 parts. The first part, again, is a multiple choice question, this time 10 minutes, and this time 20 questions, but that's slightly harder questions. That's cool. That's 20. That's part A. Part B is you'll be given some topics to research. So you'll have about 2 weeks to do this, and you'll research those topics. It could be inflation, it could be quantitative easing, it could be equity finance, it could be M&A, it could be all these things, which guess what? Get tested in the assessment centre. Hence, I did all that. So in other words, you do BUCAC, and it increases your knowledge of the things that are not guaranteed, but the type of things that are tested in the assessment centre. So just by doing BUCAC, even if you get to the round 4 and you don't succeed to get to round 5, you have already increased your knowledge of these topics, which are not guaranteed, but possibly tested in assessment centre. So there's a win-win by just doing it. You then will go into a Zoom room, and you'll be asked 4 short and 4 long questions by 2 partners of our sponsors. So just let's rewind. You could be presenting for 15 minutes and taking questions from 2 partners of our sponsors. And who are they? They are ranging from Clifford Chance, Alan Overy, Linklaters, Freshfields, White & Case, Jones & Day, Latham & Watkins, Simmons & Simmons, a whole plethora, Charles Russell Speechley, Mishcon de Rea, all these other law firms, amazing law firms, there'll be partners there. So you have, back to that presentation skill we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, you have 15 minutes to talk directly to partners, and they have opportunity to ask you questions. So even that's a really good experience. Good interview practice. You've researched that topic. We've given you the topics. We haven't given you the questions. But you've researched that topic, and then it's you being able to answer in a succinct, logical, timely manner questions that partners ask you. Guess what? That mimics an assessment centre. Guess what? That also mimics an interview. So again, it's that practice. So again, there's nothing to lose. If you get through to round 4, and then the judges, they judge between 5 and 6 in each Zoom room, your score of the 4A, which is the multiple choice, plus the 4B, the presentation, gets added up. And then from that group of 75 or 80, the top 24 go to the grand final, and semi-final and the grand final, which is held on the same day. It's then held in person in London. And just going back for a minute, last year and the year before, partners of these, who were the judges of 4B, emailed me afterwards and said, well, actually, I saw Mary or I saw Fred. Is it okay I saw Mary from X law school, and because we told them the law schools and your name, and I saw Fred. Is it okay if my graduate recruitment gets in contact with them? Of course, I say absolutely. But look at that. Even if you're not successful in going to the semi-final, here is a partner putting your name forward to a graduate recruitment from that. That is amazing. And then those students went to meetings with those graduate recruitment. Doesn't mean that they were successful, but definitely it was an introduction to that law firm, a really good introduction. A partner said, I liked Mary, I liked Fred in that competition. Please, graduate recruitment, have a chat to them. Great. So that's really good, I think. And then from there, the top 24 are invited to the semi-final and the grand final, which happens in the morning and the afternoon of the day. And they come to London. Last year, it was held at Field Fisher. So our main 4 sponsors are Ashurst, Field Fisher, Travers Smith, and White & Case. And so last year it was at Field Fisher. This year it's going to be held at Travers Smith. And you'll be coming down for the whole day. It's a long day. But that's good. It's, again, mimics an assessment centre. And in the semi-final, so the 24 all compete in the semi-final, which happens in the morning and early afternoon, and you'll be judged by both senior associates and partners of our 4 main sponsors. And you'll be undertaking a client pitch as a team. So we put you into teams of 3. So you do a client pitch. Again, you're pitching to a client, very good skill, a very important skill. So a client pitch in front of senior associates. You'll then do a commercial negotiation in teams of 3, so 3 against 3. In the same team, you did the client pitch. Good teamwork, good practice and you obviously need to prepare as a team. So you're all over the country. But you have Zoom or Teams. You do it over Zoom, Teams or Zoom, And so that's good preparation for teamwork, and then you negotiate. And the students love that. They absolutely love that because they are negotiating a real case scenario in front of two senior associates from White & Case or Ashurst, or we mix them up, by the way. We mix all the partners up. So you could get a partner from Ashurst and a partner from White & Case together, or senior associates. And they give you feedback. So then we have a lunch break, and then they give you some feedback in the lunch break. And then the last part of the semi-final is again an individual presentation to two partners of our main sponsors, and that's individual. So you do it yourself, and again take questions, and then based upon the marks or the marks for the client pitch, the negotiation, and the presentation, we select the top 6, and the top 6 then go into the grand final, which Rob was able to view last year, and they have to do a presentation. Again, we've given them the topics to them. They know the topics. In that case, it's a case scenario. It's a case scenario, and so they've been given the case scenario, and they are there to advise the client. The client may be in a takeover or in financial difficulties or whatever it may be, and so they have to provide advice to their client in front of not just me as a chief judge, but we also have last year we had the senior partner from Field Fisher and a partner from, I can't remember, but one of the main sponsors. And this year it'll be in front of a partner from Travis Smith and a partner from Field Fisher again, because they offer the first prize and the second prize, and myself. And so they take questions from the panel of us 3, but also they do it in front of the audience of all the 18 who were not successful in getting the grand final, plus the BUCAT committee, who do a fantastic job, by the way. And I have to give a shout out to Meredith and all her team. They do a fantastic job. If you are interested in being part of the committee, I'd highly recommend that. Last year, both the president and the vice president got training contracts, not solely because they were in BUCAT, but definitely helped them. They both acknowledged that. And so I would encourage you to do that. We will open applications for positions December, January. The committee's there who do a fantastic job in running the whole show and doing all this research for all the questions. So again, if you want to be on the committee, you are researching that, and they're currently doing that. We had a meeting on the weekend. They research all the questions and the answers, and so they increase their commercial awareness. Plus, they host these trainee panels. Plus, they come to the final. Plus, they run the final. Plus, they meet graduate recruitment and partners of all the finals. So it's a brilliant thing. And plus, they get to work with me. Why would you not want to do that? So the committee's there, the 18 finalists, and then we invite a group of select students, as Rob was part of that group last year. And most importantly, graduate recruitment is there watching, and some of the trainees. But most importantly, I repeat that, graduate recruitment is watching the final 6. And they're watching how they perform, what questions they take, how they present, how they speak, how they're able to think and answer questions at any of the judges. Fantastic experience. And then from their 6, the 3 judges decide who's the winner and etc. and award the prizes. And then afterwards, there's a networking event and drinks reception. This year, very kindly, Lauren Perrier, the champagne company, is going to be supplying some champagnes again. So I would encourage you to come along if you get invited. So all in all, it's a long day. It starts about 9, finishes around 9, but a fantastic experience for all the students and a good way to connect. And at the networking event, there will be not just the graduate recruitment, which is obviously key, but trainees from all 4 main sponsors. Again, I'll repeat the sponsors: Ashurst, Field Fisher, White & Case, and Travis Smith. So there'll be trainees there you can speak to. There'll be graduate recruitment, and there'll be partners. And it's a good networking event for you to meet these graduate recruitment trainees, partners, and to get to know more about those particular law firms. So again, I think a very valuable experience.
I 100% agree. And I commend you for setting it up so successfully, because it seems like it's on an upwards trajectory. Every year it gets better. I
think people know more about it, and obviously because it's a weird name, it sticks in people's minds. And the more and more people we speak to, the more people know about it, but also the more these success stories, the success stories of the winners are getting training contracts. After all, it is not just about that, but that's an important part of that. But it's more. I think that's definitely important to get these winners to get training contracts. That's absolutely true. But it's also more wider than that. It's more about trying to open the eyes for lots of students to say, look, there's a plethora of city law firms, all really good law firms, all really want you, all really want to encourage you to apply. Of course, you should do that, but you need to know that there is a certain skill set you need to have. and commercial awareness being one of the most important ones they're looking for. And they are encouraging you to do that, to do the competition. So, it increases your commercial awareness, gives you more confidence, and also gives you something to talk about if you are one of the winners, to how you prepared, how you prepared in that group exercise, that teamwork, etc., and how you were able to do the whole day. It's really good. And I know it's a very pressurized day. It's very intense for the contestants, but they all really liked it. And to the extent that so we have first year, second year, and third years, and you are able to apply. If you're a first year, you can apply in your first year. You can do a second year and third year. Keep on applying, unless you get a training contract, then you can't apply. And so we set no requirements. There are absolutely no requirements whatsoever. There are no criteria. The only criteria is that you are at a non-Russell and that you do not have a training contract. Obviously, if you have a training contract, there's no point. That's the only requirement, just that you are at a non-Russell law school.
Yeah, and I'd just add to that, just in case anyone maybe, because it is, you put it out like that, and it's a great opportunity, but it's also, to anyone listening who's seriously considering it, it must be nerve-wracking, especially if you don't have any of that experience. But I was going to say, when I went last year, it wasn't like the contestants weren't feeling their nerves. They all still did an amazing job, and I can't say I would get up there and I would have been any more confident, because it is an extremely high-pressure environment. But you wouldn't be the only person there who's feeling it on the day.
Of course not. But that's the point. By doing these presentations, just back to round 4, I know it's on Zoom, so you're in your bedroom or your house, and it's a little bit more comfortable. I accept that. But still, talking to partners, some of the partners of some of the best law firms in the world, and taking questions from them, that's, again, building your confidence. And maybe you don't do very well. That's okay. But remember that bike analogy. You've fallen off the bike, you get back on the bike, and you start pedaling again, and just keep on going. So you just got to keep on going. And it's improving that skill set all the time.
Well, I think we've covered everything.
I think we have.
Yeah, so thank you very much for coming on, because it's been an amazing conversation. I'm sure there's a lot of information that students can take away from this to shape their own paths and maybe redirect themselves if they haven't been doing it in a way which maybe they should be if they want to achieve.
And thank you, Rob, for having me. But I would just like to conclude by this: don't think of the poor country boy from the outback, and look where he came, and look at the amazing career I had in international finance and all these amazing transactions I did around the world in different countries, etc. You all can do it, but you can't kid yourself that just reading the FT or reading the odd article is going to do it. You need to really spend a lot of time, and I encourage you all to do as many things as possible while you're at law school. Your law society, mooting competition, BUCAC, all these other things. Take advantage of it and just practice, and don't be scared to apply. These city law firms definitely want you, because you can have an amazing career at these city law firms. They definitely want to encourage you to apply, but you need to have that skill set we talked about, all that skill set.
Yeah, thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Pleasure.